Hey, I'm Dr. Melissa. I'm a trauma expert and top doctor. And on this channel, I help you identify the hidden narcissist in your life and then turn that trauma into gold, becoming stronger and more powerful than you ever were before. Today, I am so excited because I have with me Renee Swanson, the founder of the Covert Narcissism group and the founder of the Covert Narcissists podcast. And we're going to talk and really dive in deep to what covert narcissism is, how people can identify if their partner is a covert narcissist, how they can get out once they realize that's true. So welcome, Renee.
Thank you, Dr. Melissa. It's so good to be here, and I thank you so much for having me today.
Oh, this is so awesome. I think I could talk covert narcissism all day long, and I'm guessing you could too.
Yes.
So while we won't do it all day long today, I think this will be a great conversation.
Good. Yes, I'm looking forward to it. Very happy to be here.
Excellent. I would love for you to take a few minutes and just tell people a little bit about yourself, who you are, how you got involved in this movement.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got involved out of necessity because I was trying to make sense out of my own marriage. I've been married for, at the time, I'd been married for about 15 years and was reaching that point of, I knew something was wrong. I wasn't sure what was wrong. I wasn't sure why it wasn't getting better, why we weren't making progress. All the questions that so many victims go through inside their own mind. And I ended up working with a therapist. I found a therapist, and on day one in that therapy session, we weren't 5 minutes into the conversation. And he asked me, he said, "Do you know what narcissism is?" And I said, I've heard the word, but I don't know a lot about it. And he basically described my husband. He defined narcissism, and I went, whoa, okay, this sounds exactly like my husband, but not quite. Like it was there, it was right, but it wasn't quite right. And then when he said the line, well, if he is a narcissist, narcissists never change. And as soon as he said that, I went, yeah, then this is not what we're dealing with here. And I kind of dug my feet in and said no to all of that. But he encouraged me to read and encouraged me to just explore and learn more. So I went home that night, grabbed a book that he had recommended. And the book's called The Wizard of Oz and Other Narcissists. And so I sat down that night and started reading. Well, one of the chapters was specifically on covert narcissism. And that's when all the light bulbs went off. That's when all of a sudden I went, oh my gosh, this is what I'm living. And I just dove in. I dove in exploration. I learned with a passion because it was out of desperation. And I started the Facebook group, Covert Narcissism group, specifically so that I could realize I wasn't alone. I knew I wasn't alone, but I needed to know I wasn't alone. And I started with like 2 people, but today, here we are. We've got over 51,000 people in that group, and it has just exploded. It is very clear that we are not alone, and that this world is definitely dealing with this in just outlandish numbers. And so I got involved in just helping people. I am 3 years out of the marriage now. I've got 2 boys that suffered from the narcissistic abuse from their dad. And, I've had to help them and get them on a positive path in life. And they are making tremendous progress in their own recovery and their own healing. And so it just to be able to help others now to go through this journey and find, figure out what's going on, get their eyes open to it, to get the support that they need, and to get on a healing path has been the most rewarding, most rewarding thing I could do in my life right now. So that is why I'm very passionate about it and very eager to help other people.
Well, that is incredible. And I think, and you might agree, but it's those of us who've been through it, who've seen it and come out on the other side that really want to open people's eyes and show them how much life can be better.
100%. And the whole point of the Facebook group is so that people can help each other. It's not a group that's designed around experts in the field or anything like that. It really is, somebody living in Texas, somebody living in New York, somebody living in England, somebody living in Australia, all these people who are dealing with this, and they are able to wrap their arms around each other and support each other just as people who get it.
And I'm really glad that you said that, because even though I have the medical background and the trauma background, covert narcissism, I don't think is something that anyone can get unless they've lived it. It's not something that you can read about in a book and then just understand it necessarily. You might be able to, like, I think when people do that, they're reading it or they're learning it like just a very cognitive level. They don't realize what it's like to have embodied or to have been a part of these like bizarre warped mind games and whatnot. And I think that you know, any professional, there are professionals that are helpful, don't get me wrong, but it can only be helpful to an extent if they haven't lived through it. And so having that shared experience is huge.
It's huge. It's huge. And that is very, very true. They will get it to a point. You know, they if they've read about it in a book, but they haven't lived it, what they are missing is the extent of the pain and emptiness and exhaustion that victim lives daily. And they cannot understand how deep that really goes. And I tell people all the time, when you are talking to someone who gets it, you know it. You you can know immediately, oh wow, they understand what I'm saying, because there's a common bond there. There's a common, you don't have to explain yourself all of a sudden. You're not having to defend yourself. When you're with a covert narcissist, especially when you're trying to explain it to someone who doesn't get it, you can sound really trivial. You can sound extremely petty. They can tell you things like, well, why would you be upset about that? And you should just get over that, and you hear these kind of things, and that just continues the cognitive dissonance that you are experiencing inside you already, because you're already doubting yourself, going, well, should I be upset about this? Am I overreacting to this? Am I the narcissist here? All of these things going on. And when you're hearing this then from people who don't get it, it can actually be extremely damaging and make the situation entirely worse, because you sound so petty. But when you're talking to somebody who gets it, and you even can say, man, I know this sounds petty, they're just going to laugh and go, I know exactly what you mean.
Oh, absolutely. And so often the people that don't get it misinterpret and think, maybe you're upset because someone gave you a gift, and they think, well, that's ridiculous. How can you be upset about that? This was really generous. It was expensive. It was whatever. But you know what the strings are that are attached surrounding that gift, or what the expectation is, or that it's really a bribe, or whatever.
Right. The underlying message, the underlying, all the little subtle stuff that's going on.
Yeah. And other people can't see that.
Mm-mm. And you can't explain it. You like trying to explain it, you will go crazy. It's like you're trying to explain a ghost, and sometimes you can get a grasp on it, and as soon as you think you've got a grasp on it, it's gone. And so, yeah, it's a very complicated issue for sure.
For sure. So you mentioned that the therapist that you saw described narcissists, and covert narcissists are, of course, a subtype of narcissism, but they're really very different. And I would love for you to share your experience of, for people who are not familiar with the term or with the difference, what makes someone a covert narcissist as opposed to a traditional run-of-the-mill overt or grandiose narcissist?
Sure. So a covert narcissist and overt narcissist are kind of the two main subcategories of narcissism. And that traditional, life of the party, loud, boisterous, grandiose person where arrogance is so visible for the world to see, falls more under that category of an overt narcissist. And they don't care typically what other people think of them. They're arrogant. They may even brag about being arrogant. I know that I'm the best, and I don't care that you don't like that. I know I'm the best, so that's your problem. And so that's more of what we think of as a traditional narcissist. The covert narcissist is a person who still feels all of those feelings inside. They still have the arrogance, the superiority, the entitlement, the need to be worshipped almost, or to feel special, and they have to be validated constantly. They still carry all of that inside them, but they hide it. they bury it in multiple reasons. One might be like in my situation, his dad was an extreme overt narcissist. You know, his dad was definitely, you know, the life of the party, the loud, boisterous person, the charmer. And when he saw that growing up and saw the abuse that his dad dished out to his mom, he chose to not be like that. He decided, I will never be like that. Well, he still carried all the internal feelings of the arrogance and entitlement, but he buried it so that he would not be like his father. And so it came out in a much more subtle way. Now, instead of being the life of the party, he was the victim of the world. And nobody could understand my specialness. Nobody gets me. Nobody can you know, you could never give enough attention or enough validation to him. It was always that he needed more, and always how much he was hurt, and that nobody could understand his specialness. And so instead of being the life of the party, I call them the victim of the party, or the victim of the world. And, you know, I saw a podcast, actually heard a podcast a couple weeks ago, where one of the people in the podcast was saying, I don't understand what a covert narcissist is, because don't all narcissists have secret affairs, or they abuse behind closed doors, or they, you know, they all have a secret life. And so would that make all narcissists covert? And I realized then that no, they're not quite getting the full picture here. It isn't about what the world does or doesn't see with a covert narcissist. It's about that the victim really truly doesn't see it.
That is true.
The victim does not recognize the abuse. They don't realize it's there, and the world doesn't get it either. Don't get me wrong, but when when you're with an overt narcissist who's going to punch you in the face, because they tend to be more physically aggressive, you know you've been hit. But when you're with a covert narcissist and those hits are coming through subtle comments that make you feel worthless, or make you doubt your reality, or make you feel like you're afraid you're about to be abandoned, all these little hits that you take, and you don't know you've been abused. And so it's more about what the victim sees or doesn't see. In fact, the covert narcissists themselves, often they have no idea. They don't think they're abusive.
For sure. And I think that point is really, really right on. The overt narcissist, typically, you know, people will have friends or family who are like, oh, I never liked him, or I never liked her.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought they were bad for you. The covert narcissists, while they are victims, they're often so likable and so friendly and so charming, and they'll leave you hurting to go help someone else. So the rest of the world thinks, oh my gosh, this person is so generous, you know. Yes. And they was subtly, with all their flying monkeys, play the victim card as well. So the victims are in the relationships longer, 10, 20, yes, 30, 40 years, because it's not like being punched in the face or having someone screaming at you for an hour and a half or throwing things or whatever. You don't necessarily know it's abuse.
Right.
But the other piece that you said that was gold that I just want to highlight is the fact that the covert narcissist oftentimes has no idea what's going on either. They had childhood trauma that created such a deep sense of internal shame that they created this make-believe version of reality to make themselves avoid that shame. They created their ideal self, and they built this world of, I mean, they have, I don't know if you agree, but I think they have more flying monkeys than any other kind of narcissist. They hundreds or thousands, and they just, their entire life has been building this fake version of reality, and they have their heart set on you being like their top flying monkey, the one who just believes all of this and sees them as a good person and a great father or mother and a loving partner. And as soon as you start saying, well, you're lying to me, or that didn't happen, or
wait a minute here.
Wait a minute, or that's not a very nice thing to say, or whatever, then they think you're actually being mean to them, because they think that their reality that they created, the entirely false fake reality, they believe with 100% certainty that it's real.
Yes. And because of that, they are so convincing. They are
So
so
convincing.
incredibly convincing. And they, you're right, they show this image to the world that they are a humble person, that they are a compassionate person. The world sees all of that. And so your friends and your family, they don't get it. And then here you are, you also have believed that they're a humble, compassionate, generous person, but it's not lining up with the way they treat you and the way they talk to you or the way they talk to your children. And so now you're trying to figure out what's going on here. And then many of them will play that victim role to you of, well, I grew up in such a bad childhood. My parents, my dad was abusive, or my mom was abusive, or whatever. And so you feel sorry for them because you do see yourself as a compassionate person. And so you want to feel compassion for them. How could I be mad at them when I know what they went through in their childhood? And so that guilt, I call it guilt manipulation, it gets used against you over and over and over. People who are with an overt narcissist are afraid to leave, typically for their own safety. They're afraid to leave the relationship because of their own safety or the safety of their children. But people who are with a covert narcissist, they're not afraid to leave because of that. They're more afraid to leave because they don't want to hurt the abuser. They feel responsible for caring for that person. And so it's more of a guilt reason that they don't leave. It's not so much about fear. It's more about they're guilty because how can I leave when I don't even think he means to abuse me? I don't think he means it. I don't think he sees it. So how can I leave? How can I justify leaving when I can't even put it into words that he can understand? And I lived that,
And the other piece there is, whereas overt narcissists, generally people will say they never apologize for anything. The covert narcissists are the masters of the most beautiful, profound, loving apologies that just tug at the heartstrings in terms of that guilt manipulation. They don't change their behavior, but how many times has a victim of a covert narcissist heard, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I had that terrible childhood, or my parents role modeled for me a terrible relationship. I didn't know that I was hurting you. I can't do anything about the past, but I promise I won't do it again in the future. And then they do it 3 days later.
And they're going to do it. And they're going to do it again and again and again. And that's the one thing I could always count on, is I always knew he would give me another reason to go, what's wrong here? What am I not seeing? And I guess where the point that I reached with all of this is, I blamed myself for a long time that I couldn't put it into the right words for him. Like if I can't put it into words he can understand. And he even told me this one time, is he said, look, if you can't help me to see how I'm hurting you, how is that my fault? And that was what I was getting in my marriage. And I finally realized it wasn't that he wasn't getting it. It was that he was not putting any effort into getting it. Like, it wasn't, okay, I didn't mean to hurt you. I can apologize. I didn't mean to hurt you. He didn't mean not to hurt me. He didn't put the effort into not ever hurting me. And when I realized that, and I shifted my mind around on that a little bit, I finally quit blaming myself. And, it's not that he's not understanding me. It's that he's not trying to understand me. It's not that he doesn't mean to hurt me. It's that he's not trying not to hurt me. And so that was really an eye-opening for me, and just a mental shift where I went, okay, this is no longer my fault.
Well, the reality is he was never thinking about you at all. Everything he is doing is to protect himself and to protect that fairy tale world that he's created. And so there, of course, there's no thought into not hurting him.
Right.
But when we were in it, it's almost impossible to see that.
It is. And you feel like you're doing everything you can. My son one time said to me, he goes, Mom, this was after the divorce, and I've apologized to my boys, 1,000 times for just everything that happened and everything that was going on in our home. And my son at one point said to me, look, Mom, he said, you did A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And he went through the entire alphabet, down to X, Y, Z. And he said, you tried every angle, you did everything, every, let's approach it this way, let's approach it that way, let's do this. And he said, I saw all of that. And Dad couldn't even do A. There is no way in all of this that this is your fault. And I want people to hear that, no, you're not perfect. I'm not perfect. There were things I can look back and go, I could have said that better, or I could have done that better. Absolutely. That's part of being human. There's nothing wrong with going, okay, I could have said that better. Nobody died and made me God that I had to say everything perfect. Okay. That the same thing is true for everybody out there listening. But if they won't even do one single step that would move things in a good direction for your relationship, then this is not on your shoulders. This is not your weight to carry.
That's absolutely true. And I think so often of families where the children have been turned into the covert narcissist flying monkeys, and they retaliated. It sounds like you're very blessed that your children see the light, so to speak.
They do. Yeah, they do.
But it's very common that they don't, that they end up being caught into the whole mental spin and the guilt manipulation and everything about the sane or the healthy parent.
I talk about that in a book that I have. It's called Parenting with a Toxic Partner. And it is also one of the Facebook groups I have. It's my smallest Facebook group, but it is a group where people can support each other that are parenting now in this situation. And so just know that resource is out there. And then the book that I have is Parenting with a Toxic Partner.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's one of those things I think is just so important, because and I think it's one of the reasons, and I would love for you to hear about sort of how you became aware, once you read that book, The Wizard of Oz and Other Narcissists, and what the journey was to identify that he really was a covert narcissist and to exit. And I know for a lot of people, they're afraid for their children, because they feel like even though the covert narcissist maybe is not physically abusing the children or things in a way that an overtly toxic person would, and sometimes they do as well, but they're afraid to have them with this sort of unsupervised time of manipulating and gaslighting and kids.
Yeah, I mean, it's a psychological abuse that ends up then coming out at the children. And for me, like in my situation, by the time I got my eyes open to what was really going on, my boys were probably 13 and 11. Okay, they were in that young preteen age. And that was when I was really finally starting to see what was going on. And they were targets. Like it wasn't just me that was a target of all the verbal and emotional abuse. They were as well. And at that point, I thought, wow, if I leave this marriage now, they'll have to spend weekends with him. They'll have to spend, parts of the summer with him. They'll have to spend some vacation time with him without me there. And I had been playing buffer for all of their life. And I couldn't do that. Like, I knew at the time, this is not the time for me to exit this relationship. But mentally and emotionally, I did go ahead and start exiting the relationship. Like, I started just getting my mind in a better place. I quit carrying all the blame. I quit blaming myself. I knew that these feelings of worthlessness, I started to identify where they came from, so that I could get myself in a healthier place and be better able to help my children. I did stay in the marriage all the way through until they were 18 and 16. And at that point, and through that time, actually, the saving grace for us was my husband's addiction was gaming. And so he would go game for hours and hours and hours. Like, on a weekend, for him to be on gaming for 12 hours on a Saturday was normal. Well, that allowed me and the boys to just function as a family. So it actually was a little bit of our saving grace, for us. And I recognize that that's not the case for everybody. And so everybody's got to kind of do whatever is right for them. But that was a saving grace for me and my situation and my relationship with my boys. And so by the time that I actually divorced, I was in such a healthy place that the divorce was not dramatic. It was not emotional. I was already in so far along on my healing journey, that it was actually a real positive experience for me.
That is awesome. What do you think was what would the key things be that you did to do that healing while you were still in the relationship?
Yeah, it's hard. It is hard to heal while you're still in the relationship. And there were a couple of things that were key points for me. One was when I first started to question all of this, and I really started to kind of wonder, see, this was a life partner for me. I'm married for life. Like my dad is a preacher, a Southern preacher, and divorce was just never an option. It was not in my game plan. And when I started to really kind of discover what was going on here, and I thought, oh my gosh, what do I do now? My aunt made a comment to me. She said, look, if you left the marriage today, could you say that you gave it your all? Like you did everything you could do. And at the time, my answer was no. No, I had not been brutally honest with him about how I felt. I had tried to be honest with him, but you know how we always are trying to sugarcoat it or trying to kind of, smooth things over and play peacemaker. And I thought, you know what? No, I haven't. And so I dug in for about the first 2 years of that journey with my therapist. I dug in and I gave it everything I had. I went through, I took him on a vacation where it was just the two of us without the boys. I was brutally honest. I laid my heart out at his feet, and was just like, you know what? I need to be very clear about all of this with him. And every time I laid my heart out to him, it was like he just had to stomp on it all over again. And it got shot down over and over and over. And so I did finally reach a point where I waved the white flag and went, okay, now I can say I gave it everything I've got. I was brutally honest with him. I tried every angle, like every aspect. I was exhausted. It nearly killed me, okay, to go through all of that. But now I knew I could say, yes, I gave this everything I had to make this work. And so that was one turning point for me where I knew I could do that. And that meant I could walk away with my head held high, that I knew that I had given it my best. And so that was one turning point. The next was then to change my mentality. I had to get the blame off of my shoulders. I even had said to my friend one time, I know it's my fault that he games so much. And my friend looked at me and went, wait, what did you just say? And I said, well, it's my fault that he's on the gaming so much. And I need to take responsibility for that and get him. He goes, how old is your husband? And I was like, yeah, okay, he's 40. And he goes, how in the world is that your fault? And I carried it as my fault because I thought I didn't fuss at him enough to get off. And he went, wait a minute here. He's a full grown man with 2 children, a wife and 2 children. How he spends his time is his responsibility. And so I really had to change my mindset of I was carrying a lot of the blame. I mean, a person who is, my tendency is towards codependency. That's my background. And that's how I the environment I grew up in led me towards to be more of a codependent. As a codependent, I take everybody else's faults as being my responsibility to fix. And I had to start recognizing that. I had to start identifying that. And so I started making a list of all the things I was taking responsibility for in my life. And I started crossing them off like, no, this is not mine. This is not mine to carry. And I'd even write down whose it was. This is his to carry, or this is theirs to carry. And I started, I made list after list. There was a list I had to make of all the things I needed to forgive myself for. I was blaming myself for things that were not my fault. And I had to go through and forgive myself for some of that. And so that was another big part of my healing journey, was forgiving myself for raising boys with this man. I was carrying that as some of the blame on me. So it was a big journey of forgiveness. It was self-guided. My therapist definitely helped, but there was a lot of self-guiding that I did just through my own research and just things, listening to my heart. What does my heart need today? And so every day I just did whatever was the next right thing for my heart.
That's beautiful. I did all of those things, and I completely agree that need to, even whether it's a romantic relationship or family relationship or friend or whatever, to feel like I did everything I possibly could so that I could look back and have no regrets.
Yes.
The mindset of not blaming, I so get all of that. And the other piece for me that was really helpful, that's contributed in the way I'm trying to help people now, is this awareness and the vocabulary. And I know reading your newsletter and things, that you're into the vocabulary too, but for me it was so helpful to be able to recognize, oh, that's projection. That's not about me.
Yes.
Or, oh, I know this one, that's deflection. And I didn't have to say it out loud. Sometimes I do say it out loud to people, but to be able to recognize it, oh, that's triangulating, or that's gaslighting,
Right.
or that's
Circular conversations. That
yeah,
was a
or
big one for me.
answer faking, or whatever or the
Yeah.
false, oh, there's a great false apology, look at that one. And once I could identify it and I could name it, I knew it wasn't mine, because I
Yes.
knew it was a dysfunctional tactic that someone was using, and I could then let it go, like, that's clearly their problem.
Yes.
That's not mine.
Yes.
And that was really empowering in terms
Yeah.
of extracting
The blame.
self-blame piece.
The blame. Yeah. The blaming that victims go through. Yeah.
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 Oh my gosh, Renee, this has been so awesome. I am so glad. I think we could chat for hours about this. And
Oh, clearly.
and
Clearly. Yes. And maybe we will. We just make this, continued.
yes, I think that was
Continued.
fantastic.
Yes.
But go ahead. I know we talked about your group a little bit. Go ahead and tell the people watching this video today where they can find you, how they can connect with you, how they can learn more on their journey of extracting themselves from covert narcissistic abuse.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do have a Facebook group. It's Covert Narcissism group. That's kind of where I got started in all of this. It is a closed group, which means that only members can see your post and your comments. And so that's, a little bit of a protection. It is still social media. And so I'm looking for other avenues. I've just actually recently opened a Patreon a platform for our members where it's not social media. It's a little bit safer of an environment for people who are still trying to extract themselves from these relationships. And so you can find me on Facebook, but you can also find me now on Patreon. It's Patreon. And it's a fairly new platform, but it's a great platform in regards to the safety that's there, not being social media. And so that's recently been developing, and beginning in January, I'm going to do a bi-weekly in Patreon. I'm going to do a bi-weekly tidbit. It's a tidbit of a glimpse of awakening from covert narcissism, extracting yourself from covert narcissism, getting covert narcissism extracted out of you. Because we embody a lot of that, which I know, and some of the work that you've done and that you do. And so all of that is coming through Patreon. You can also find me on Anchor, which is the Covert Narcissism podcast. I do a weekly, sometimes bi-weekly podcast. And in fact, Dr. Melissa was just interviewed for my podcast. So those of you listening here, jump over there and hear what she has to say over there as well. And that is found through Spotify, through iTunes, all of those. So if you need to email me directly, you're more than welcome to. I'm Renee, RENEE, at covertnarcissism.com. That website, my website is covertnarcissism.com, is the website that I run. And so all of these different resources are on there as well.
That is so awesome. I will put your links in the description on
Great.
the video as well. And thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and really your generosity of spirit being here with me today.
You're very welcome. And Dr. Melissa, thank you so much for having me here today. It is my passion to help people who are living this nightmare. It is a nightmare. It is an intense nightmare. And there is an awakening out there. There is life after this narcissism. And so I do wish everyone so much peace on that journey of healing.
Thank you.